Hello, my ducklings. Kenny and I are here. Say hi, Kenny. He was really busy napping. So he's had a very busy life. He slept on the floor. He slept on the couch. He chewed a chipmunk toy for about 10 minutes. He ate, and that's it, right? Busy life for Ken. I hope you've had a great day. Today we are on day 6 of our Read Aloud, reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the first Harry Potter book. Now we've met a few characters. We've met 2 mysterious characters named Professor Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall, and they're a witch and a wizard. We don't know much about them yet. We've also met Harry. He is an orphan. His parents have both died. His aunt and uncle told him they died in a car crash, but we know something else happened to them. There's an evil bad guy named Voldemort who died. He disappeared when the night that Harry's parents died. We've also met Harry's horrible aunt and uncle and his awful cousin Dudley. And so we started chapter 2, and we started chapter 3. How exciting. This chapter is called The Letters from No One. I love that chapter name. It sounds so mysterious. They heard the click of the letterbox and flop of letters on the doormat. "Get the post, Dudley," said Uncle Vernon from behind his paper. "Make Harry get it." "Get the post, Harry." "Make Dudley get it." "Poke him with your smelting stick, Dudley." Harry dodged the stick and went to get the post. 3 things lay on the doormat. A postcard from Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, who was holidaying on the Isle of Wight, a brown envelope that looked like a bill, and a letter for Harry. Harry picked it up and stared at it, his heart twanging like a giant elastic band. No one ever in his whole life had written to him. Who would? He had no friends, no other relatives. He didn't belong to the library, so he never even got rude notes asking for books back. Yet here it was, a letter addressed so plainly there could be no mistake. Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, 4 Privet Drive, Little Winging, Surrey. The envelope was thick and heavy, made of yellowish parchment, and the address was written in emerald green ink. There was no stamp. Turning the envelope over, his hand trembling, Harry saw a purple wax seal bearing a coat of arms, a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding a large letter H. "Hurry up, boy," shouted Uncle Vernon from the kitchen. "What are you doing? Checking for letter bombs?" He chuckled at his own joke. Harry went back to the kitchen, still staring at his letter. He handed Uncle Vernon the bill and the postcard, sat down, and slowly began to open the yellow envelope. Uncle Vernon ripped open the bill, snorted in disgust, and flipped over the postcard. "Marge is ill," he informed Aunt Petunia. "Ate a funny whelk." "Dad!" said Dudley suddenly. "Dad, Harry's got something!" Harry was on the point of unfolding his letter, which was written on the same heavy parchment as the envelope, when it was jerked sharply out of his hand by Uncle Vernon. "That's mine," said Harry, trying to snatch it back. "Who'd be writing to you?" sneered Uncle Vernon, shaking the letter open with one hand and glancing at it. His face went from red to green faster than a set of traffic lights, and it didn't stop there. Within seconds, it was the grayish white of old porridge. "Petunia!" he gasped. Dudley tried to grab the letter to read it, but Uncle Vernon held it high out of his reach. Aunt Petunia took it curiously and read the first line. For a moment it looked as though she might faint. She clutched her throat and made a choking noise. Vernon! Oh my goodness, Vernon! They stared at each other, seeming to have forgotten that Harry and Dudley were still in the room. Dudley wasn't used to being ignored. He gave his father a sharp tap on the head with his smelting stick. "I want to read that letter," he said loudly. "I want to read it," said Harry furiously, "as it's mine." "Get out, both of you," croaked Uncle Vernon, stuffing the letter back inside the envelope. Harry didn't move. "I want my letter," he shouted. "Let me see it," demanded Dudley. "Out!" roared Uncle Vernon, and he took both Harry and Dudley by the scruffs of their neck and threw them into the hall, slamming the kitchen door behind them. Harry and Dudley promptly had a furious but silent fight over who would listen at the keyhole. Dudley won, so Harry, his glasses dangling from one ear, lay flat on his stomach to listen at the crack between door and floor. "Vernon," Aunt Petunia was saying in a quivering voice, "look at the address. Look, how could they possibly know where he sleeps? You don't think they're watching the house?" "Watching, spying, might be following us," muttered Uncle Vernon wildly. "But what shall we do, Vernon? Shall we write back? Tell them we don't want—" Harry could see Uncle Vernon's shiny black shoes pacing up and down the kitchen. "No," he said finally. "No, we'll ignore it. If they don't get an answer, yes, that's best. We won't do anything. But I'm not having one in the house, Petunia. Didn't we swear when we took him in we'd stamp out that dangerous nonsense?" That evening, when he got home from work, Uncle Vernon did something he had never done before. He visited Harry in his cupboard. "Where's my letter?" said Harry the moment Uncle Vernon had squeezed through the door. "Who's writing to me?" "No one. It was addressed to you by mistake," said Uncle Vernon shortly. "I've burned it." "It was not a mistake," said Harry angrily. "It had my cupboard on it." "Silence!" yelled Uncle Vernon, and a couple of spiders fell from the ceiling. He took a few deep breaths and then forced his face into a smile which looked quite painful. "Yes, Harry, about this cupboard. Your aunt and I have been thinking you're really getting a bit big for it. We think it might be nice if you moved into Dudley's second bedroom." "Why?" said Harry. "Don't ask questions," snapped his uncle. "Take this stuff upstairs now." The Dursleys' house had 4 bedrooms, one for Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, one for visitors, usually Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, one where Dudley slept, and one where Dudley kept all the toys and things that wouldn't fit into his first bedroom. It only took Harry one trip upstairs to move everything he owned from the cupboard to this room. He sat down on the bed and stared around him. Nearly everything in here was broken. The 1-month-old camera lying on top of a small working tank Dudley had once driven over the next-door dog. In the corner was Dudley's first ever television set, which he had put his foot through when his favorite program had been canceled. There was a large bird cage which had once held a parrot that Dudley had swapped at school for a real air rifle, which was up on a shelf with the end all bent because Dudley had sat on it. Other shelves were full of books. They were the only things in the room that looked as though they had never been touched. From downstairs came the sound of Dudley bawling at his mother. "I don't want him in there. I need that room. Make him get out." Harry sighed and stretched out on the bed. Yesterday he'd have given anything to be up here. Today he'd rather be back in his cupboard with that letter than up here without it. Next morning at breakfast, everyone was rather quiet. Dudley was in shock. He'd screamed, whacked his father with his smelting stick, been sick on purpose, kicked his mother, and thrown his tortoise through the greenhouse roof, and he still didn't have his room back. Harry was thinking about this time yesterday and bitterly wished he had opened the letter in the hall. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia kept looking at each other darkly. When the post arrived, Uncle Vernon, who seemed to be trying to be nice to Harry, made Dudley go and get it. They heard him banging things with his smelting stick all the way down the hall. Then he shouted, "There's another one! Mr. H. Potter, the smallest bedroom, 4 Privet Drive." With a strangled cry, Uncle Vernon leapt from his seat and ran down the hall, Harry right behind him. Uncle Vernon had to wrestle Dudley to the ground to get the letter from him, which was made difficult by the fact that Harry had grabbed Uncle Vernon around the neck from behind. After a minute of confused fighting, in which everyone got hit a lot by the smelting stick, Uncle Vernon straightened up, gasping for breath, with Harry's letter clutched in his hand. "Go to your cupboard. Your bedroom," he wheezed at Harry. "Dudley, just go." There's the illustration. Isn't that great? Poor Harry. Harry walked round and round his new room. Someone knew he had moved out of his cupboard, and they seemed to know he hadn't received his first letter. Surely that meant they'd try again. And this time he'd make sure they didn't fail. He had a plan. The repaired alarm clock rang at 6 o'clock the next morning. Harry turned it off quickly and dressed silently. He mustn't wake the Dursleys. He stole downstairs without turning on any of the lights. He was going to wait for the postman on the corner of Privet Drive and get the letters for number 4 first. His heart hammered as he crept across the dark hall toward the front door. "Ah!" Harry leapt into the air. He had trodden on something big and squashy on the doormat, something alive. Lights clicked on upstairs, and to his horror, Harry realized that the big, squishy something had been his uncle's face. Uncle Vernon had been lying at the foot of the front door in a sleeping bag, clearly making sure that Harry didn't do exactly what he had been trying to do. He shouted at Harry for about half an hour, then told him to go make a cup of tea. Harry shuffled miserably off into the kitchen. And by the time he got back, the post had arrived, and right into Uncle Vernon's lap. Harry could see 3 letters addressed in green ink. "I want," he began, but Uncle Vernon was tearing the letters into pieces before his eyes. Uncle Vernon didn't go to work that day. He stayed at home and nailed up the letterbox. "See," he explained to Aunt Petunia through a mouthful of nails, "if they can't deliver them, they'll just give up." "I'm not sure that will work, Vernon." "Oh, these people's minds work in strange ways, Petunia. They're not like you and me," said Uncle Vernon, trying to knock in a nail with the piece of fruitcake Aunt Petunia had just brought him. See, look. There's Uncle Vernon. That's where the mail comes through. That's the letterbox, and he's nailing in the front door. On Friday, no fewer than 12 letters arrived to Harry. As they couldn't go through the letterbox, they had been pushed under the door, slotted through the sides, and even a few forced through the small windows in the downstairs toilet. Uncle Vernon stayed at home again. After burning all the letters, he got out a hammer and nails and boarded up the cracks around the front and back doors so no one could go out. He hummed "Tiptoe Through the Tulips" as he worked and jumped at small noises. On Saturday, things began to get out of hand. 24 letters to Harry found their way into the house, rolled up and hidden inside each of the 24 eggs that their very confused milkman had handed Aunt Petunia through the living room window. While Uncle Vernon made furious telephone calls to the post office and the dairy trying to find someone to complain to, Aunt Petunia shredded the letters in her food mixer. "Who on earth wants to talk to you this badly?" Dudley asked Harry in amazement. On Sunday morning, Uncle Vernon sat down at the breakfast table looking tired and rather ill, but happy. No post on Sundays, he reminded them happily as he spread marmalade on his newspapers. No letters today. Something came whizzing down the kitchen chimney as he spoke and caught him sharply on the back of the head. Next moment, 30 or 40 letters came pelting out of the fireplace like bullets. The Dursleys ducked, but Harry leapt into the air trying to catch one. Out! Out! Uncle Vernon seized Harry around the waist and threw him into the hall. When Aunt Petunia and Dudley had run out with their arms over their faces, Uncle Vernon slammed the door shut. They could hear the letters still streaming into the room, bouncing off the walls and floors. That does it, said Uncle Vernon, trying to speak calmly, but pulling great tufts out of his mustache at the same time. I want you all back here in 5 minutes, ready to leave. We're going away. Just pack some clothes. No arguments. He looked so dangerous with half his mustache missing that no one dared argue. 10 minutes later, they had wrenched their way through the boarded-up doors and were in the cars, speeding towards the motorway. Dudley was sniffling in the back seat. His father had hit him round the head for holding them up while he tried to pack his television, video, and computer in his sports bag. They drove, and they drove. Even Aunt Petunia didn't dare ask where they were going. And we'll pause there for today. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Cuddle up with something fuzzy and cuddly. Maybe draw something, do something creative, and have a wonderful evening.